Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive into school improvement. We're really excited to dig into some fascinating work by Dr. Howie Knoff,
Yeah.
who you probably know is the president of Project Achieve Educational Solutions.
Right.
He's got years of experience working with schools as a consultant,
He does.
and he's identified these 12 crucial components for school improvement.
Yeah, you see a lot of those what works lists
Right.
in education, but what's so interesting about Dr. Knopf's work is that
Yeah.
it's not just about celebrating the successes.
Right.
He really emphasizes acknowledging those half-empty glass moments, those areas where schools might be falling short.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like everyone's so focused on showcasing the positive
Right.
that the real problems just get swept under the rug.
Exactly. And he tells this really
Yeah.
striking anecdote from his own consulting experience.
Okay.
He worked with a school district in Wisconsin
Mm-hmm.
that was completely obsessed with their high achievers. But they completely ignored the 1/3 of students who were not proficient.
Wow.
It's like they were trying to motivate their way out of a skill deficit,
Yeah.
which, as Dr. Knopf points out, is a recipe for disaster.
Such a good point. It makes me think about
Yeah.
those situations where we try to pump people up with motivational speeches and slogans, but we haven't actually given them the tools or the training they need to succeed.
Yeah,
It's like sending a basketball team with zero practice to
exactly.
play against seasoned pros.
Exactly.
No amount of cheering is going to make up for that lack of skill.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right.
And it highlights this key principle that underpins all 12 of Dr. Knopf's components.
Okay.
It's not about those quick fixes or superficial motivation.
Yeah.
It's about building capacity, addressing root causes, creating systems that actually support sustainable improvement.
Okay, so let's unpack these 12 components then.
Correct.
It sounds like they're kind of like a roadmap for schools to follow.
Exact. And they're all interconnected.
Right.
Each one plays a crucial role in the overall success of the system. Let's start with one that might resonate with you given your background.
Okay.
Professional development.
Okay.
Dr. Knopf is adamant that ongoing training for teachers
Yeah.
is absolutely essential, and not just those one-off workshops
Right.
that people forget about a week later.
Yeah.
He's talking about continuous learning, coaching, and support that's directly relevant to what teachers are doing in the classroom.
So it's about giving teachers the tools they need to constantly refine their craft
Yes,
and adapt to the ever-changing needs of their students.
precisely. And Dr. Knopf doesn't just throw out this general call for more training.
Right.
He highlights 3 specific areas where teachers should be developing their skills:
Okay.
mastering content knowledge, implementing and adapting teaching strategies, and building their overall confidence and competence. It's about a holistic approach to professional growth.
That's a lot to unpack.
It
It
is.
really speaks to the complexity of teaching. But
Yeah.
if professional development is one side of the coin, then what's the other side? Where do schools get the information they need
Well,
to make sure their professional development is hitting the mark?
that's where data management systems come in.
Okay.
Effective schools are data-driven. They use data to track student progress, identify those half-empty glass situations,
Yeah.
and personalize learning experiences.
Okay.
And it's not just about collecting data for the sake of it. It's about using that data to make informed decisions about instruction,
Yeah.
interventions, and resource allocation.
So it's like having a constant feedback loop
Exactly.
where schools are gathering data, analyzing it, and then adjusting their practices based on what they learn.
Exactly. It's about moving away from gut feelings
Okay.
and towards evidence-based decision-making. And Dr. Knopf isn't just talking about test scores.
Right.
He advocates for this multifaceted approach to data collection,
Okay.
looking at academic performance, student behavior, school climate surveys, and even feedback from parents and community members.
It sounds like a pretty comprehensive system.
It is.
But all this data collection and analysis
Yeah,
must require a lot of coordination and collaboration.
it does.
So who's responsible for making sure it all comes together?
That's where Dr. Knopf's emphasis on shared leadership comes in.
Okay.
He believes that leadership shouldn't be confined to the principal's office.
Yeah.
Effective schools empower teacher staff and even parents to take ownership of the improvement process.
Okay.
It's about creating a culture where everyone feels invested in the success of the school.
So it's more about distributed leadership,
Mm-hmm.
where different individuals with specific skills
Right.
are empowered to lead in their area of expertise.
Exactly.
That makes sense, especially when you're dealing with something as complex as school improvement.
Yeah.
It can't just be one person trying to manage it all.
Absolutely. And when you have that shared sense of responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
you're more likely to get buy-in from everyone involved.
Right.
It creates a more collaborative and supportive environment.
Yeah.
Which, as we'll see, is essential for addressing some of the other challenges that Dr. Knopf identifies.
So we've got professional development, data management,
Yes.
and shared leadership. 3 down, 9 to go.
We're making progress.
What's next on Dr. Knopf's list?
Well, before we jump into the next component, it's important to understand that all of these elements are interconnected.
Yeah.
They're not isolated pieces,
Right.
but rather part of a larger integrated system. And this system needs a clear direction, a sense of purpose that guides all of its actions.
So it's like having a destination in mind before you set out on a journey.
Exactly. And that's where strategic planning comes in.
Okay.
Dr. Knopf emphasizes that effective schools
are all about continuous improvement.
Right.
They're constantly evaluating their strengths and weaknesses, looking for opportunities to grow, and coming up with action plans to achieve their goals.
So it's about being proactive and intentional.
Exactly.
Not just reacting to problems as they arise.
Exactly. And this is where that data we were talking about comes into play. Strategic planning isn't just about brainstorming ideas.
Right.
It's about using data to inform your decisions. Set realistic goals, and track your progress over time.
It sounds like a pretty rigorous process.
It is.
But I can see how it would be helpful in keeping everyone focused and moving in the same direction.
Absolutely. And it's not a one-time thing.
Right.
Effective schools revisit their strategic plans regularly, making adjustments as needed based on new data and changing circumstances.
So it's an ongoing cycle of assessment planning implementation. And evaluation, kind of like a never-ending quest for improvement. Precisely. And that's what's so exciting about Dr. Knopf's work.
Yeah.
He doesn't offer a quick fix or a magic bullet.
Right.
He provides a framework for continuous growth and development, a roadmap for creating schools that are truly responsive to the needs of their students.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered professional development, data management, shared leadership, and strategic planning. 4 down, 8 to go.
Wow.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah.
But it also feels like there's this underlying assumption that everyone's on board and ready to row in the same direction.
Right.
But we know that schools are complex ecosystems.
They are.
How do you actually create a culture where everyone feels invested in this continuous improvement process?
That's a great question. And it brings us to one of the most foundational components, school climate and behavior management. Dr. Knopf argues that you can't have effective teaching and learning if students don't feel safe, respected, and supported. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels a sense of belonging and where positive behaviors are explicitly taught and reinforced.
So it's not just about cracking down on bad behavior.
Right.
It's about proactively creating a culture where those behaviors are less likely to occur in the first place.
Exactly. And this is where we see a shift from traditional punitive approaches to behavior management towards more holistic and preventative models.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Knopf highlights the importance of school-wide social-emotional learning programs, often referred to as SEL.
Right, SEL. I've heard a lot about that.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I'm still a little fuzzy on what it actually looks like in practice.
Sure.
Is it just another class that gets added to an already packed schedule?
It's actually much more integrated than that.
Yeah.
Think of it as a framework that can be woven into all aspects of the school experience, from classroom lessons to hallway interactions to how conflicts are resolved. It's about explicitly teaching skills like self-awareness, empathy, communication, and conflict resolution.
So it's not just about academic knowledge.
Right.
It's about giving students the tools they need to navigate the social and emotional complexities of life.
Precisely. And there's a growing body of research that shows that SEL programs can have a significant positive impact not only on student behavior, but also on academic achievement, attendance, and even long-term well-being.
That's amazing.
I
mean, that's pretty compelling.
It is.
But I'm also wondering, how does SEL actually address those disruptive behaviors that can derail a lesson or create a negative learning environment?
That's where Dr. Knopf brings in another key concept.
Okay.
Positive Behavioral Support Systems, or PBSS.
Okay.
It's a framework that shifts the focus from reacting to misbehavior to preventing it by clearly defining expectations, teaching appropriate behaviors, and consistently reinforcing those behaviors when they occur.
So instead of just punishing a student who acts out,
Right.
you're trying to understand the underlying reasons for that behavior.
Exactly.
And teach them more constructive ways to cope with those challenges.
Exactly. And this approach often involves collaborating with parents, counselors, and other specialists to create individualized support plans for students who are struggling.
It sounds like a much more proactive and empathetic approach.
It is.
Than simply sending kids to detention or suspending them.
Right.
But I'm also realizing that not all behavioral issues are created equal.
Right.
Some students might need more intensive support than others.
Absolutely. And that's why Dr. Knopf emphasizes the importance of a multi-tiered system of support.
Okay.
MTSS.
MTSS, okay.
This framework acknowledges that students have different needs and provides varying levels of intervention and support based on those needs.
So it's kind of like a safety net with different layers of support?
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
At the universal level, you have supports and interventions that are available to all students, like clear classroom rules and positive reinforcement systems.
Right.
Then for students who need a bit more help, you have targeted interventions like small group instruction or social skills training.
Right.
And finally, for students with more intensive needs, you have individualized support plans developed in collaboration with specialists.
It sounds like a pretty comprehensive system.
It is.
But I'm imagining it requires a lot of data collection and analysis.
It does.
To figure out which students need which level of support.
You're absolutely right. And that brings us back to the importance of data-based problem solving, which is another one of Dr. Knopf's key components.
Right.
It's about using data not just to identify problems, but also to understand the root causes of those problems. And to develop targeted interventions.
So it's not just about throwing random solutions at a problem.
Right.
It's about being strategic and data-informed in your approach.
Exactly.
But how do you actually ensure that those interventions are effective?
That's where careful monitoring and evaluation come in.
Okay.
Dr. Knopf stresses that interventions should be evidence-based and that their effectiveness should be regularly assessed using data. If an intervention isn't working, you need to be willing to adjust it or try something different.
Sounds like a very iterative process.
It is.
Constantly refining your approach based on what the data tells you.
Exactly.
But I'm also curious about the practical realities of implementing all of this. It seems like it would require a lot of coordination and collaboration.
Yes.
Not just within the school, but also with families and community partners.
You're hitting on a crucial point.
Okay.
Dr. Knopf emphasizes that effective schools don't operate in isolation.
Right.
They build strong partnerships with parents, community organizations, and other stakeholders.
Okay.
They recognize that parents are the experts on their own children. And that the community can offer valuable resources and support.
So it's about breaking down those silos and creating a more interconnected ecosystem of support.
Exactly, and that's reflected in another key component.
Okay.
Year-to-year articulation.
Year-to-year articulation, what is that?
This is about ensuring a smooth transition for students as they move from one grade level to the next.
Okay.
Or from one school to another.
So it's about making sure that the supports and interventions they're receiving don't get lost in the shuffle of a new classroom or a new school building.
Precisely. It's about maintaining continuity of support and ensuring that students don't fall through the cracks during these critical transitions.
This is all starting to feel very interconnected. It's like a complex web where each strand represents a different aspect of the school experience, but they're all interwoven to create a supportive and coherent whole.
That's a great way to visualize it. And that's what's so powerful about Dr. Knopf's framework. It's not just a list of isolated strategies. It's a holistic approach that recognizes the interconnectedness of all aspects of school improvement.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about creating a positive school climate, using data to drive decision-making, providing multi-tiered support systems, partnering with families and communities, and ensuring smooth transitions for students. It's a lot to take in, but I'm starting to see how it all fits together.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, me too.
And remember, we still have a few more components to explore. But before we dive into those, I'd be curious to hear what's resonating with you the most so far.
Okay.
Is there a particular component that stands out? Or a question that's lingering in your mind?
As we're going through these components, I keep thinking back to that school district in Wisconsin that Dr. Knopf talked about. The one that was so focused on their top students that they completely missed those who were struggling.
Yeah, it's like they were missing a huge piece of the puzzle.
It really is. And it makes me wonder, how do you shift the school's mindset away from that kind of achievement at all costs mentality?
That's a good question.
And move toward a more holistic approach?
That's where Dr. Knopf's emphasis on data-driven decision-making comes in.
Okay.
He argues that effective schools use data not just to measure outcomes, but to really understand the needs of all their students. To identify areas where they're falling short, and then to develop targeted interventions.
So instead of just celebrating those students who are already doing well, you're using data to figure out how to support those who are struggling.
Exactly.
And create a more equitable learning environment for everyone.
Exactly. And this data-driven approach should be woven into every aspect of school improvement, from strategic planning to professional development to the implementation of those multi-tiered support systems.
Right. It's about moving away from gut feelings and towards evidence-based practices.
Absolutely, but
data can be overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be.
There are so many different types of data that schools collect.
Right.
Test scores, attendance records, behavioral data surveys.
Yeah, how do you make sense of it all?
Exactly. How do you actually use it to drive meaningful change?
That's a great point, and it highlights the importance of having clear systems for data management and analysis. Effective schools, they invest in training for their staff on how to collect, analyze, and interpret all that data. They also develop data teams that meet regularly to review the data, identify trends, and come up with those action plans.
So it's not just about having the data.
No.
It's about having the skills and the structures in place to use it effectively.
Exactly. And it's about making data accessible and transparent to all stakeholders, including teachers, administrators, parents, and even students.
Wow.
When everyone has access to the same information, they can work together to develop solutions that are truly data-informed.
That makes sense. It creates a shared understanding of the challenges and a collective sense of responsibility for addressing them.
Exactly.
But even with all the best data in the world, you still need skilled teachers in the classroom.
You do.
To actually implement those interventions and support student learning.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another crucial component. Aligning curriculum, instruction, and assessment.
Aligning curriculum, instruction, and assessment.
Yeah, Dr. Knopf argues that what's taught in the classroom, how it's taught, and how it's assessed, should all be aligned with the school's overall goals and with the specific needs of its students.
So it's about making sure that everything is working in sync.
Yes.
From the curriculum materials to the teaching strategies to the tests the students take.
Exactly. And this alignment should be evident at all levels. From the individual classroom to the school as a whole.
Got it.
For example, if a school is focusing on developing students' critical thinking skills, then its curriculum, instruction, and assessments should all be designed to promote and measure those skills.
That seems pretty straightforward in theory.
It does.
But I imagine it can be challenging to actually achieve that level of alignment in practice.
You're right. It's not easy.
Especially in schools with such large and diverse student populations.
It requires a lot of collaboration and coordination among teachers, administrators, and curriculum specialists. It also requires a willingness to be flexible and to adapt your approach based on the needs of your students.
And speaking of adapting to the needs of students, one of the components we haven't talked about yet is academic instruction and engagement. I know Dr. Knopf is a big proponent of personalized learning.
He is.
How does that fit into this overall framework?
That's a key piece of the puzzle. Dr. Knopf argues that effective schools recognize that students learn at different paces and in different ways. They use a variety of instructional strategies.
And technologies to create learning experiences that are tailored to the individual needs of their students.
So it's about moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach to teaching.
Exactly.
And recognizing that students have different strengths, interests, and learning styles.
Precisely. And personalized learning isn't just about individualized instruction.
Yeah.
It's also about giving students more choice and agency in their learning.
Huh.
It's about creating opportunities for them to explore their passions, pursue their own inquiries, and demonstrate their learning in a variety of ways.
That sounds like a much more engaging and empowering learning experience.
It is.
Than just sitting passively in a classroom listening to a lecture.
Right.
But I imagine also requires a pretty significant shift in the role of the teacher.
Absolutely. In a personalized learning environment.
Yeah.
Teachers become more like facilitators or coaches, guiding students through their learning journeys and providing support along the way. It sounds like a pretty radical departure from the traditional model of education.
It is in some ways,
Yeah.
but I can also see how it has the potential to be much more effective in preparing students for the challenges of the 21st century.
It's been so fascinating unpacking these 12 components with you.
It has been a great discussion.
They really do paint a comprehensive picture of what it takes to create a truly effective school.
They do.
So as we wrap up, what's the one key takeaway that you'd like our listeners to ponder?
I think the most important takeaway is that school improvement isn't about finding that magic bullet or implementing a quick fix. It's about building a culture of continuous improvement where everyone in the school community is committed to learning and growing and working together to create the best possible learning experiences for all students.
And that's a journey that requires a lot of hard work.
It does.
Collaboration, and a willingness to constantly adapt and evolve. Dr. Knoff has given us this great roadmap.
He has.
But it's up to each of us to take those steps.
Yes.
And contribute to creating schools that are truly effective, supportive, and empowering for all.
Well said. And remember, this is just the beginning of the deep dive.
Yes.
We hope this sparks further exploration and discussion for you.
Exactly.
As you continue your own journey in the world of education.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks.